You are listening to the Fresh Take Network.
What it is, what it do, welcome to Fresh Take. Joshua Adam William Arthur with Richard Stroban, and a privilege to have Pat Steinberg from Fan 960. Pat, absolute privilege to have you on here. Maybe I even call you McLovin from what your profile picture is as well, aka McLovin, but it's a pleasure to have you on the pod.
It's good to be here, boys. Let's rock and roll. I'm happy to do this.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Pat. What a wonderful time to be able to chat with you. And like we said just before we started recording, this is a little different. Usually you're the guy asking all the questions, so this is going to be a little odd for you.
Hey, it's good. I don't have to do a bunch of prep. I can just sit down and have a little conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. So things started for you, like Josh, obviously a SAIT grad. I'm a SAIT grad and now teaching there, and you're a SAIT grad as well. I never taught you. I was there doing the night class when you were taking the full-time program, but I don't think our paths crossed very much, type of thing. I tried to stay out of the newsroom when I was there. They barely let me in there now, as it is. So going into SAIT, a big step for you, and then kind of the springboard to everything that's happened. How was your SAIT experience for going through there, man?
It was awesome. It was still like it's still looking back. Like I don't know if I get any type of road to actually being a sports broadcaster without it. And like it was such an easy decision to go to SAIT. I remember because all I wanted to do in late junior high and in high school, all I wanted to do was sports broadcasting into sports radio or play-by-play or something in sports, right?
And get paid for it.
And get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so there was just like there was Mount Royal. There was, I guess you could have gone and looked at, BCIT or Ryerson or Carleton had a junior journalism program. But for whatever reason, when I went to the open house, I guess it would have been sometime late in 2001 or early in 2002. Mm-hmm. I went to the open house, and I remember I met with I believe it was the dean of the program at the time, Dick Bourne, and I met him there, and basically he gave me a rundown of what the program was and gave me an idea as to what you do in broadcast news or radio, which were the two ones that I was most interested in. And it just was an instant fit, because it was like, okay, well, this is aimed right at getting you into the industry. And it wasn't just aimed at getting you into the broadcasting industry. It was aimed to like get you into doing what you want to do. And so it was an easy choice, and the best decision I ever made. Honestly, it was lifelong friends and unbelievable instructors, and they put you through the ringer in terms of the amount of work they pile on you, and which I say only in a good way, because it prepared me for what was coming up. Like everything that and I say this to anybody who is, because I get the chance to talk to students all the time for different projects, and whenever they ask, like, why was SAIT important, or what should I be looking for at SAIT, like, they prepare you to such an nth degree that as soon as you step into wherever you're going for your first job, you're going to be prepared to do what they ask, because they'll ask you to do, like, this, Rich, and Josh, you do the same thing. Like, they'll ask you to do like 10 things for one project, where in the industry you might only have to do 2 of those things to get it done, but they're asking you to do 10 because different radio stations or TV stations do it differently, but now you've got it all covered. So that was probably the top 1 or 2 greatest life decisions I've ever made was going to SAIT, because I would nowhere close to be where I am right now without it.
Well, thanks on behalf of the program and the alumni as well. Thanks for being such a great ambassador as well for the program. You've always waved the flag of SAIT, and and to be honest, your success is what SAIT. The reason why the program does really well is because our students do really well and succeed, and and you've done that ever since you've left the door. So thanks, like I said, thanks for being a wonderful advocate. But it started long before that. I found an article where I guess you were like 14 years old and you were worked for the Calgary Cannons as an usher and a kind of a cheerleader, and they called
Yeah.
it a cannoneer. Let's hear that story. I think, was that your first job ever?
Yeah, that was my first ever like legitimate job. I went. They had a job fair,
Yep.
and my mom was just like, "Hey, do you want to like?" Because we'd always go. The family would go to 9 or 10 Cannons games a year, and so we were pretty big fans, and they were always so much fun. So she said, "Hey, there's a job fair. Do you want to go down?" I was like, "Yeah." So I guess I would have been in my I'm thinking I would have been from junior high to high school. So from grade 9 to grade 10 would have been that summer that I went down and applied. And yeah, they hired me as a cannoneer, and immediately I didn't know what I was getting myself in for initially. I just thought that, you showed people to their seats and ran up, and if somebody got hit by a foul ball, you helped them out. But yeah, and there was clapping and dancing and all that type of stuff that was involved with it too, which at the time I wasn't necessarily prepared for, but you dove right in and it was pretty fun once you did it. So yeah,
They ever make you wear the mascot?
never wore the mascot. I was never
Okay.
in Wabash. And it was actually pretty cool because it started like that. It started with doing the cannoneer stuff. But by the end, the last year or so, I transitioned to being on the grounds crew, which was just the absolute coolest thing. Even thinking back to like because the fact that we had a AAA ball team here, and like we had guys that were literally a step from the majors, and guys who would get called up to go play, and they'd be playing with the Marlins the next day. It's actually mind blowing. And now knowing that we don't have that in this city, but yeah, you get to go out and rake the infield, and in the middle of games you'd be out there pulling second base out and raking around. It was actually the absolute coolest job for an 18-19-year-old kid. So yeah, started with the Calgary Cannons and did that until
Wow.
to their final year in the city, and one of the coolest jobs that a teenager could ever have.
Wow.
And now you get to represent them. I see you with your Sea of the Dead
Yeah.
cannon shirt, which is pretty cool.
I ripped that shirt. It was devastating. It happened
Oh,
several years ago. It was just devastating. So I need to get a new one.
we're gonna have to
But
talk to
yeah,
Sea of the Dead about that.
yeah, I think I'm sure I'll be able to work
Yeah.
something out with them. So yeah, it's I actually know the guy really well who
Yeah,
who
and
runs
they're
it.
actually a sponsor of this podcast. So
Are they? So there you go.
yeah,
So you know
yeah,
John and the gang at CSA.
yeah.
Yeah, they're good people, and I know him really well. And yeah, it's actually, when you think about how good that caliber of ball was, and
Hmm.
knowing that we don't have it anymore and haven't for the better part of 2 decades, it's like, man, I don't know if specifically for me and people my age, kind of the millennial groups, I
Yeah.
don't know if we knew what we had when we had it.
Well,
Because
specifically, you look at some of the players of that time, right? You know, the Jay Buners and Edgar Martinez. Everyone goes to
yeah,
A-Rod, and absolutely. But like thinking Edgar Martinez is a Hall of Famer. Jay Buhner was a hell of a ball player as well, and they go on to be part of that fantastic Mariners group as well, right? And then the fact you had A-Rod on there when you were, around them, did you ever have any interaction with any of those guys?
none of the players, like, because there was that era, and
Yeah.
their best era was the Seattle era, where they were connected to the Mariners and their number one affiliate. They had some, like, Vizquel played there, and
Yeah.
they had some good players in the White Sox and the Pirates days. But I worked there during the Marlins days, and the Marlins were their affiliate the entire time I was working for them, or they were the Marlins affiliate, and they had a couple of guys go on and play.
Not
And
Dontrell Willis, right? It was after that or before that?
after who?
Dontrell Willis is, like, I'm thinking around the time when they would
He
leave.
so he never played in Calgary. I think
Yeah.
he would have hit the scene a couple years after they left.
Yeah, I
So
thought so. Yeah.
he would have gone through Albuquerque, I believe. But there were some guys who played, and it was cool because they'd come hang out with you in the grounds crew area, because it's where the washroom was, and it was right by the home bullpen, so they'd always be hanging out. And chatting with you. So it was cool to see a couple of guys go on and even get a cup of coffee in the majors. Like those guys are playing Major League Baseball, and they also played in Calgary. So, and then the coolest part of all is that so they moved to Albuquerque right afterwards, and the same guy who was the general manager in my days 20 years ago is still the general manager in Albuquerque, John.
Wow.
Wow.
We still we talk about it all the time at 960. We're like, I got to get that guy on the air. But it's like, you're like, well, in the middle of hockey season, everything's a grind. So one of these days I'm getting that guy on for half an hour and just
I need to know if they named it the Isotopes because of the Simpsons. I'm like
100%
sure.
100%
Okay, I thought so.
They did. They even when they named the team, like when it got official that they were getting the team and the Cannons were moving, they held a name the team contest, and Isotopes was one of them, and it won in a landslide.
It better get a hunger
it absolutely
strike.
comes from the Simpsons.
Too funny. So it wasn't just the Cannons you were involved in. You also you were the media relations guy with the Vipers as well, right?
That's right, and that was within. So Cannons ended right as I was starting SAIT. I think their last game was at Burns Stadium or Foothill Stadium. And that was during the first week of my first year at SAIT, because I remember vividly, for whatever reason, I just remember the next day going into SAIT and saying, geez, the Cannons are done. And here I am in my first year at SAIT. It was kind of like a, eye-opening, like, okay, I'm done high school and now I'm starting, being an adult. So that was my first year at SAIT. And then I want to say, so I finished SAIT when I was 19. So I want to say a year later. Yeah, the following summer, the summer of 2005. Yeah, because it was during the lockout, and they settled the lockout that summer. So summer of 2005, a year after I had finished at SAIT, I got to do a year of doing the play-by-play and the media relations for the Calgary Vipers, which completely came out of nowhere and was the most unexpected thing ever. And was just I want to talk about an eye-opening experience. Never been out of the country, and now you're traveling on buses through the Midwest U.S. and with a bunch of minor league ball players who are all in their mid-20s, late 20s, and just a complete eye-opener for a pretty sheltered 20-year-old kid. So yeah, did that for a summer as well. That was 96 games and just an absolute whirlwind 4 months. That was awesome, actually.
So when did you start working at the Fan then? It must have been after that, obviously.
No, because that was through the Fan. So I got that. I got that job through the Fan. So I went and did practicum in Grand Prairie, and worked at 97 Sun FM in GP. I still the boss then still listens to the radio station in Calgary now, and we get a text or a text line from my boss in Grand Prairie. So I went up with another guy that I went to school with, and he's also working in radio in Calgary. So Grant Buchanan works at 97.7 in Calgary. So he and I went up to Grand Prairie together. And then worked it at the station there. I came back and then finished out my time at SAIT, and a buddy of mine was working at 960, and he said, hey, we need a board op. You should just email the boss. And I had been sending out resumes around just to try to get that first job, right? And so I emailed my boss, Kelly Kirsch, at the time, and he emailed me back to give me a call. I gave him a call. He set up an interview, came down the next day, and he kind of hired me on the spot for that job. Wow. So it was complete happenstance, right place, right time again, and started at the Fan in, I guess it would have been May 04, because I was doing that job during the run to the Stanley Cup final, and was working at the station while they were the voice of the Flames, and the craziest time to be a Flames fan in the last 25, 30 years, right?
Yeah. Too cool. Go ahead, Josh.
That's crazy. I want to take it back. Just who were some of your idols growing up as a broadcaster?
Well, the two guys for me before I got into broadcasting, you had one on a couple weeks ago, is Peter Marr. Like I listened to that guy. So for me, 960 started early 2000s, and there was no all sports radio station before that, but we did kind of have all sports ish at 66 CFR.
Yeah.
Before it went all news in 2006, it was an oldies station. And for about, I want to say 4 or 5 years there, they did this bizarre programming thing where they did oldies from 6 a.m. in their morning show till about 4 p.m. And then from 4 p.m. until the end of the night, they did sports because they had Jock Wilson did sports talk with Jock. They
Yep.
were the voice of the Flames. They had the Hitman. They started taking the Jim Rome show, and that would be the second guy. So I somehow stumbled across 66 CFR doing sports at night, and I just got hooked. And so every night before I went to bed, I would just listen. So whether it was the Hot Stove Lounge with Jock and Peter and Mike, or then it turned into Mike Stubbs was doing it and Mitch Peacock was doing it. Or I would listen to sports talk with Jock, or I would listen to Jim Rome, which was at the time a 4-hour show, but we ran it taped. So we ran it with like no commercial. So you'd get through a 4-hour show, and I'd listen to 2.5 hours, and that would be basically the whole show. And then I'd go, then I'd be asleep. So it was Peter Marr and it was Jim Rome. Those are the two guys for me, because I would listen to them literally every weeknight before going to bed. And just like that, they were the constants for me, which is why, I don't think I'll ever be working side by side with Rome, but to be able to work side by side for a number of years with Peter Marr and share the same press box and even be the host of broadcast for 2 years while he was still working is still the most surreal thing, that you're like, that guy remains like one of the gold standards of play-by-play on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like, and was my absolute play-by-play idol. And then I got an opportunity to work with him like legitimately side by side for 6 or 7 years. It still is hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's almost pinch yourself moment. You don't believe that it's actually happening, right?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And then to see, like, just to see how that man goes about his business, and the amount of just good habits that rubbed off on me from working beside Peter Marr. Like, you don't even have to ask questions and you'll just learn from the man. There has never been a more prepared man in sports broadcasting than Peter Marr. It's truly unbelievable. And he taught it to Rob Kerr, and Rob Kerr taught it to me. And that's the one thing that if anybody asks, like the thing that I'm most proud of at any point during broadcasting is just knowing that I prepare my tail off, and it's all because of those two guys. And like Peter Marr is just an absolute standard setter when it comes to the world of broadcasting.
Peter said on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said it to my class every time he's ever talked to my class, that for all the preparation he does, usually only 15 or 20% of it will get to air that night. Same for you, I'm guessing, right?
100%. And it's because you just want to have all that stuff so that if something happens, you've got it. And, especially in my job, which is kind of a hybrid game broadcast and sports talk show, you're kind of always preparing, right? So you've always got different notes that you're updating and different things that you're looking at before you go to bed, or that you're getting ready for each show. So yeah, I'm would be 100% the same way. That and now the thing with Pete is that he never felt like he needed to get it all in. It was never like, I got to show you how smart I am. It was just like he knew it so that if all of a sudden some fourth line guy took a bad penalty, but that was his 5,000th penalty minute, he'd be, well, that's the 5,000th penalty minute for a player that's, or a defenseman scores a goal, hasn't scored in 42 games, but that's his 200th career goal. It's just ready to go right there because he had it. Yet he doesn't need to let you know that he's got it. You just knew that he always had you covered, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. And maybe it didn't get to air that night or on that broadcast, but it was always there and ready for something another time if it ever did come around. So go 100%. Ahead, Josh.
No, I kind of, what goes into your prep? Like, do you have like a certain like core like routine that you go through with it all?
Well, I do. So kind of what I do is I like to have a lot in front of me and just be able to go to it. So for hosting the afternoon show, so I've got a 4-hour block from 2 till 6 o'clock. And so you know, there's a lot of different things that go into planning the show. There's group chat and talking to, you know, co-hosts and producers about what we're going to talk about that day. But for me, I like to have things, you know, pretty not scripted out, but I like to have things pretty laid out in front of me so that, you know, one of the big things for us in sports radio is to, and I think in any form of radio, I think Rich would agree with this too, but, you know, you want to have a strong tease into a break, and you want to be able to grab people, whether it's coming out of a song or coming out of a break. For us, it's coming out of a break. You just sat through 7 minutes of commercials. Now you've got, you know, the next 19 minutes you're listening to us. So we want to catch you. So I'll write out my hook lines and my tease lines, and I'll make sure that they're pretty close to word for word, so that I know that they're delivered exactly the way that I want them to be delivered. And then the rest I've just got, I'll have the 2 o'clock segment. I'll have, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. A couple of different things, different talking points, different stats, different, you know, things that I think are interesting. And then you've got it so that when the conversation might go there, you can just have, well, I've got in front of me. So, well, actually, you know, Jacob Markstrom is 4-1-0 with a 972 against the Habs this year. And then you'd have that instead of having to go look it up on the fly. So I do that for every talk show segment. I have that laid out. In interviews, I try not to script my questions, but I like to have a roadmap as to where I'm going, but also it's flexible enough that you can go away from it and come back to it. And then for the pre and post game shows, pretty similar. I kind of work with our color guy, Peter Labardius, who does the pregame show as our analyst, and he and I work together to kind of go through what order we're going to go in things and what he wants to get to. And then again, I have that pretty laid out in front of me. So I know where we're going, and I can steer at certain situations, and we know what audio we're going to play here and there. So that would be kind of the way that I prepare, is that I have things pretty laid out, but also not so set in stone and so rigid that you can't pivot or go in a different direction when it makes sense to do so, right?
Yeah, or breaking news or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so for some people that are young Pat Steinbergs listening to you, and you know, like you did listening to Peter, your typical day. This is not a 9-to-5 gig for these kids that are coming into this industry. This is an all day, all consuming type of thing for sure. Like you're up. Let's hear what your typical day is like on a game day.
So, okay. So if it's I don't want to scare people off either.
No, they need to know the truth, man.
For sure. And so, okay. So for on a typical game day, on a home game, so let's say it's a 7 o'clock start. So I'll usually be up and ready to rock by about 9. I'll be, you know, breakfast and you'll be alert and ready to go for the day. I'm definitely not a morning person, but like I certainly can't go and work out before a long day and be working out at 6 a.m. or anything like that. But usually I'm alert and ready to go at about 9, and usually I'm out the door at about 9:45. And I'll be at the Saddle Dome for about 10 o'clock. They do a morning skate on a game day at 10:30. So I'll get there, and pretty much as soon as I sit down at the Saddle Dome to watch morning skate, it's you're working from 10:15 until you sign off that night. So you're watching morning skate, you're seeing who's playing with who's starting in net. And then you're getting the show ready on the fly. You tweet anything out that you need to do, and then, you know, in a typical non-COVID year, you'll finish that. You'll go into the locker room and you'll get your 2 or 3 media scrums, potential one-on-ones with Flames players. You'll come out, you'll listen to the coach talk, then you'll go back up and watch the visiting team skate if you want to do that, and then go back inside the visiting locker room, get your sound from them. And then usually, again, in a non-COVID year, which we're assuming and hoping things will be back to a whole lot more like this come October, I basically go around the corner to our studio downstairs in our hot stove lounge, and I'll sit down there. And by that time, it's about noon, and I'll just start to work. And you start to prepare. Now you're preparing for and I've done a little bit of this stuff already, so I've probably got about a good head start on it. But now you're preparing your show, which starts at 2 o'clock, so you're getting all that together. And then as soon as I've hit send on the email that it's time to go for the show, well, I usually have about an hour. It's about 1 o'clock or so, and then I'm getting the pregame show ready, and now I'm doing all that and cutting audio and getting interviews ready and lining that up. So usually it's about 1:55ish when I'm done everything. You've hit send. You can take a sip of water or go for a little walk or get something to eat. And then bam, you're on the air at 2. And then from 2 till 6, you do the show. From 6 to 7, now you're doing the pregame show. As soon as the pregame show is over, you head upstairs. Now you watch the first period. You're getting all that stuff ready. First intermission, watch the second period, second intermission, watch the third period, head back downstairs. And then as soon as the game is done, you start the post-game show, and that goes on for 90 minutes or so. Then you do the call-in show, which goes on for another hour, 90 minutes. And then finally you're done. And it's actually crazy. Even now I look back at there'll be days when I'm like, so it is now 1 a.m. and like you haven't breathed. There's been no breathing since about 10 a.m. You're like, whew, I just did like a 15-hour day with and it's not even like a bad thing. It's just like, you're like, whoa, that day flew by. I can't believe how much actually got done or how much actually you needed to do in that day. So they fly by. It can be a grind in an 82 game season when you're in February and you're like, whew, game 50 here. It's like, okay. but it usually flies by pretty quickly. And those days, they can be grinds, but more often than not, they usually fly by because you don't have time to think about anything other than the task at hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of mentioned in pre-COVID times, what was the pandemic working COVID before we started back up again with the bubble like for you?
Oh, just bizarre. Like, we had no sports to talk about. All of a sudden, you take a radio station that is built on reacting to live games and reacting to stories, and there was nothing. All we had was speculating. All we had was wondering when the NHL was going to come back, if the NBA was going to start up.
The Jordan doc helped a little bit.
What's that?
The Jordan doc helped a little bit. It was like
the
that
Jordan doc helped.
Beautiful few weeks.
The NFL draft helped.
Yeah.
It was held in the first month or so of the pandemic. So you had a couple of things, but for the most part, like, it turned into a sports talk show, turned into just like a dude talk show. And we just like, we'd talk a little sports. We'd talk a little, this date in Flames history. We'd be like, oh, you know what? And 27 years ago, they won this series against Vancouver. Like, let's maybe talk about that. We'd bring on guests and have them on for way longer than we normally would. And we'd talk about the Last Dance, or we'd talk about the Tiger King, or we'd talk about whatever the hell we were watching at the time. It really did turn into, free form radio because we didn't have anything else. And we needed to fill time, and we needed to make it compelling. We still had advertisers that were with us, as many as a ton of them dropped off as every radio station or television station had to deal with, but you still want to put together a good product. And so it was weird. It was, fever dream, right? Like that.
Yeah.
March, April, May, absolutely just bizarre. And you still think back, you're like, I don't even know. I don't remember half the things that we talked about because it was so weird. You're working from home, all that type of stuff. But it certainly, I think, made every single one of us a better broadcaster. It made us all more comfortable in being able to, talk about things we didn't necessarily have them right in front of us. So it was bad because it sucked, but it was good because it made you better, right?
Yeah, it made you learn a lot of new technical skills and learning stuff. We talked about this just before we started recording as well, about we're a year into this COVID, who knows how much longer this is going to go on for. Local sports, the young kids playing high school football, the people who are in junior hockey, the people who are, all the sports, even dance for that matter, for when you break it down to that, there's a tremendous amount of young athletes that are negatively affected, obviously, from this. I wonder what your thoughts are on what this is going to do years from now, if we're going to see a little bit of a lull in hockey players or in football players or in other sports that really suffered from this.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's kind of scary because, like, there are athletes that have lost a huge year and a bit of development time at whatever sport they're playing, right? Like you're a grade 11 high school football player, and all of a sudden you didn't get a season, and that's like a massive year. That's a massive year in learning the craft. It's a massive year in putting on weight on your frame, and training like an athlete, and all of a sudden you don't have that. And junior hockey players, yes, we're seeing the CHL, at least in 2 leagues, have been able to play, but I mean, who knows if the Ontario League's going to play? There's draft eligible kids who didn't get to play an entire year, and it's going to mess with where they get drafted and if they get drafted. And you have there's the I feel bad for the athletes, like the minor hockey players or the recreational soccer players, or like dance, or the young kids, young athletes who aren't able to get that experience for a year, and hopefully it's only a year. And you hope that doesn't knock their interest level off, and they don't just pick something else up during this pandemic, and now they're like, you know what, I don't really need to go back to that. You hope that doesn't happen to such a large degree, and that we don't see that lull. But I don't think you can write it off, because I think that there is that potential that it happens. And then the other thing is that I feel so bad for some of these, because I do think ultimately, like Calgary minor hockey, it'll survive, right? They'll be back. Yeah. It'll survive because it's not a big enough entity where it needs an infusion of dollars and advertisement and all that. Like, it'll survive and it'll come back. And the NHL will come back, as we're seeing. It's playing right now, and it's those leagues in the middle, those organizations in the middle, the ACAC, U Sports, the CFL, even some of the major junior leagues, like these leagues that are big businesses but don't run at a massive profit, that I really worry about their long-term future, because the pandemic has killed the middle. The multi-billion-dollar entities, they've been able to survive because they've got huge dollars. Right. And the smaller entities are able to survive because they don't need that. They work at more of a grassroots level. But those middle groups, they've been really squeezed here, and we've seen some real difficulties.
Well, and I think what's going to happen after, I mean, it's all speculative, obviously, but I think what's going to happen after that is this one group of youth are going to have that lull, like we talked about. But I would not be surprised if there's a huge explosion after this of people wanting to get back into things that they couldn't before, because maybe we took it for granted before. Like to just go and play minor hockey somewhere. It was like, of course, this is Canada. Of course, we're going to do that. What could ever stop us from playing hockey? Right. So I wonder now, whether there's going to be this big explosion of those, kids who are wanting to get into it. So, maybe there's going to be a lull. So who knows?
Well, and you've got that huge, not just like athletic development, but it's also just like from a social standpoint. And like it's such a huge thing for a 13-year-old to be able to go play sports. It's huge for them mentally, and you make friends, and it's an outlet. And it's I just hope that it's back closer to normal come the fall. Like, fingers crossed. It feels like we're getting there, but everything's so, we can't predict the next day, let alone the next 5 months. So you never know, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Number one, when you talked about the COVID shows, I remember at one point you guys like, how many more times can we talk about Alex Lafournier and this draft? We've overdone these prospects over and over again. But at the same time of not really being able to process those assets. I mean, we're seeing with the NFL draft, I mean, last year was an absolute crapshoot, right? Of knowing where certain guys are going. You saw certain guys drop. I mean, even this year, I think we're kind of seeing it. You get a little bit, like Zach Wilson got a pro day and a few other people did. But you're seeing like that Niner pick, and it's like, or the Atlanta pick, it's like, well, just take Kyle Pitts. He's the best guy. But they're still kind of not having the amount of ability to take a chance to look at everybody. And do you think that's, even with this upcoming NHL draft and whatnot, where they keep on getting pushed down the field, you've obviously seen an effect of not being able to scout everyone, like you talked about, Ontario Hockey League may not even play. So it's impossible to really scout some of those players and know where they can go. So, look at the Flames recently. They do that trade for Bennett. They get the second round pick. All of a sudden it's like, well, that second pick, we don't know what it could be, because the draft is going to be all over the place.
Well, and it's why you didn't see a lot of 2021 picks moving at this deadline, because I think every team's like, what is that 2021 pick going to be? Because we don't like the whole this NHL draft, at least the last draft, you got a good chunk of hockey, right? Like seasons ended in March and there was no Memorial Cup and there was no Frozen Four. So you lost some of your scouting, but you still had a pretty good book. This year, your book's a complete mess because you've got the Western League. They're playing 4 teams in a bubble. You've got the Q, which is playing, and they don't play for 6 weeks, and they play again. They don't play for 4 weeks. You got the NCAA. Some were playing, some weren't. The OHL isn't playing at all. Some Junior A was playing, some wasn't. AJHL has been able to play at different times. BCHL hasn't. The European scouting has been a complete mess because you had guys playing there, then their leagues got shut down, and you had a World Juniors, but the World Juniors was hard to evaluate because a lot of guys hadn't played in 7-8 months when they were playing there. So this is going to be like the draft. The NHL draft gets more and more jumbled up team to team every single year. But this year, I bet you if you took a look at Calgary's list, Edmonton's list, and Florida's list, their top 10 would have maybe 2 things that are the same, and the rest would be completely different because of how much they've been able to scout, where their scouting focus is, and that just makes it that much more. If you have a huge scouting presence in Ontario and you don't get to scout anything, well, your list is going to look a whole lot different than if you've got a huge European or Western presence, right? So it's going to be weird.
It's going to be more like a lottery than anything else.
100%. And it is to begin with. Like the NHL draft is such a crapshoot to begin with. And now this year, you might as well just roll the dice a lot of the time.
Looking at your career as well, you're writing for different websites and obviously for getting stuff prepared for your show. What's the stress like on you for having to always have constant content, because people are ravenous, they're wanting stuff all the time, and for you to continue your image and build your brand, it's constant content, isn't it, Pat?
Yeah, it's quite the machine that you need to. You put yourself right into the teeth of a machine that is always moving, and it used to really rattle me, right? Like there were times when I was first starting to get the opportunity to do talk radio and host shows, you'd be like, okay, I need something in every segment, because what are you going to do to fill a segment? Like, what is there to talk about? And I just and there are times when, even now, summertime or in the middle of a pandemic, you're like, okay, what the hell are we going to talk about today? But it doesn't bother me the same way. I'm far more confident now that I'm able to figure it out. And I write for the CFL, right? And they have had me writing every Monday. I've written every week since the last game they played in November 2019. God. And you're like, I look back and I was thinking, like, after I finish with you guys here, I'm going to start writing my article for tomorrow. And it's like, I've got an idea. I know what I'm going to write about. And I just think back, I'm like, how the hell have I been able to, like, I don't even know how I've come up with content sometimes. Like some of the stuff that you pull out of, where you're like, whew, I don't know how I was able to get 1,000 words out of that, but you make it work. And so, yeah, it used to really rattle me. You used to get a lot of anxiety, or I did anyway. I used to get a lot of anxiety, a lot of sleepless nights if I didn't feel like you had 15 different topics to talk about or to be able to throw to. But I've gotten much better at just personally being able to roll with it and say, okay, if there's not a whole lot today, well, we can spend more time on one topic, and we'll always come up with something to talk about. There's always going to be something in sports. But yeah, there is a pressure. I now kind of embrace that pressure. I feel like it keeps me on the edge a little bit more and keeps me sharp. But yeah, there were stretches 5-6 years ago where it rattled you and kept you up at night. So it's all part of the growing and maturing process in your job, that you're able to deal with that stuff and able to embrace slower times more than when you were a little younger, a little less experienced, right?
Mm.
So as you've been in this, how have you noticed that social media has kind of changed how you've done things and watched other broadcasters, be in the game, and also like how you saw technology kind of change where the industry has gone?
Well, I mean, I don't know, because we kind of got probably not quite three different generations, but three different age groups talking here. I would suggest that social media and the advent of social media is the biggest change that I've seen in media since I've been in it and since I've been interested in it. And I'm 17 years next month at the radio station, and I can't think of anything, whether it be the advent of MP3s or digital technology and being able to do things that much easier. The advent of 5 TSNs and 4 Sportsnets and all, like, those things are all huge. They've all made their impact, but I don't think anything has made an impact as much as social media has. Like the news breaking that happens on Twitter as one platform, the branding that happens on Instagram and TikTok, and the amount that you can grow yourself on those platforms, like those things didn't exist. And now it's because of how big a deal social media is, and because of how the industry, like the pure broadcasting industry, is getting smaller and more skeleton staff and more about just efficiency, right? If you don't do social media well, you're in a bad spot. If you don't do it well, you're being left behind. And I can't remember, like when they went from reel to reel to carts, or from carts to digital music. Like, okay, if you were behind and it took you a little while, it's not like you'd be so far behind you'd be out of the industry. You just have to adapt, and some people would adapt slower than others, and you'd figure it out. Whereas now, if you don't have a social media presence, what are you doing? Like, you're not, you can't do a job properly. You can't build a brand. And I look at people who, my Twitter presence, that's the area that I've been able to leverage the best. And for the longest time, I just didn't have an Instagram. And then I'm like, well, I should probably do that. I mean, it's a bigger platform than Twitter is. There's more people on Instagram than there are on Twitter. So I should probably do that. And I'm learning about TikTok now, and I friggin' love it. It's you can go down rabbit holes for hours just scrolling videos. And I'm just learning even now. And I've always been pretty good at technology and keeping up on things and leveraging it right. And I'm learning nonstop about it, because if you want to do just one thing in this day and age, especially if you're getting into the industry, like there are guys like, Bob McCown when he retired, or Jim Rome, or there are guys that, you know what, they can just do one thing because they're that good at it, they're that established at it. But you're just getting into it and you just want to be a sports talk radio host, you're like, you should probably do about a bunch of other things. You should be good at social media. You should be able to write. You should be able to do stuff technically. Like, you kind of have to embrace a lot of different things these days, I find. And social media is one of those non-negotiables. I look at, like, I was just thinking as we're talking about that, there's a weather guy in Charlotte, North Carolina. And his name is escaping me right now, but he's a weather guy at a local Fox television station in Charlotte. Not a huge market, right? And this guy has got 1.5 million Twitter followers and more than 2 million TikTok followers, because he is a branding expert. He's gone from being, cold fronts and it's going to be rainy and that type of stuff to, okay, he still does that, but then he also dances on TikTok and does collaborations on Instagram. And now he's built himself this massive following. You're like, okay, that guy is a branding expert. And that's just an example of how you can go from here to here by leveraging your social media. And there's never been anything like that before, at least in my time in broadcasting, that would allow you to do that.
If you do a TikTok video of with a pocket dog around the Saddle Dome concourse, you better send it, because it's going to go viral.
Yeah,
I gotta learn. Like, I now know the TikTok trends, and I have an account. I haven't done anything on it yet, but like, I this summer I'm gonna try to like start doing kind of like poorly doing the trends and doing them for for our audience, and see if I can get some people that might find it amusing. There's dance trends and there's all kinds of different things. So,
cool.
It's fascinating how it's kind of like, so if I don't, Josh, how old are you?
I'm 30. I just turned 36 2 days ago.
Oh, okay. So when I said that there's really only two age groups here, because you're an 84, you're an 85 then?
85. Yep.
Okay, and I'm an 84. So then, yeah. So then we're both in
Yep.
the same age range, and so we got two kind of generations here, and
I held on to my basketball dream a little too long instead of going right to the sportscaster dream.
hey, I mean, all the power to you. That's
Yeah.
If you can play. If there's one sport that anybody is worse at on the planet than I am at basketball, I've yet to find them. But I mean, it's
By him.
It's crazy. No good at basketball either, Rich. It's crazy because Rich, you are kind of that one generation ahead, and your radio experience, you've seen it where I came in where it was just starting, where you kind of had to do different things.
Mhm.
When you first started, like a radio jock was a huge deal. Like that was all you need to do, and if you were a good radio jock in a major market, like you were getting paid, and that has changed dramatically as well over the last 30-40 years, and so that's why I'd be curious as to what your observations are when it comes to social media compared to Josh and I, because I mean I don't know, has there been anything that has been that big a deal in your time?
No, and certainly not the abundance of platforms that are available. Like there's new ones dropping all the time. How long ago was Facebook the big thing, and now nobody's on Facebook anymore. Like there's the kids nowadays, and when I say kids, the 15, 16-year-olds, they probably will never have a Facebook account, right? It's starting to go out that way, but when I started, it was you were on the air and you had to take phone calls, and that was about it. But now it's like you have to manage the Facebook account when you're on the air. You have to manage the Twitter account, Instagram as well. You have to do all the other stuff when it comes to your regular job, and you still have to be a disc jockey as well, and interacting with the people. So yeah, I don't think there's been anything that's affected the industry more. But you know what? The medium of radio has really adapted to websites and Twitter and Facebook, and it's been a real benefit where they can use those as advertising platforms and revenue generators. And some of the other mediums out there, essentially the internet killed newspapers for all intents and purposes.
You stole one of my questions. That's what I was going to get to.
So it comes down to, it's how radio has been able to adapt and morph, and it's still the only medium that you can do other things while you're consuming it. When it comes down to all these screens that these kids are on and TikTok and watching videos, the audio platform, podcasts and radio is something that you can do while you're cooking your dinner, or while you're driving, or while you're working, or wherever. You don't have to be fully immersed with a screen in front of you and only watching it, type of thing. So that's why I think, a lot of people are commenting on, is radio dead? And they've said that, for decades and decades. As long as people are able to do other things and consume, content, whatever that happens to be, whether it's music or sports or news, of course it's going to be there for them.
Well, it's funny. So there's two things that come to mind when you say that. First of all, like I agree completely on the radio front, and I'm biased because radio is
because you're on it.
my medium, and it's always like I love radio, and the overall, not even art form, but just all of what goes into radio and making a good radio show or a good radio broadcast of a hockey game or a basketball game. Like there's something that has always drawn me to it. Maybe it's the fact that you can, if you want, you can just show up looking like absolute trash and nobody knows it. There's probably a little bit to that, but the one thing about local radio is, to this day, there's still nothing that is as immediate and hyper local as radio. Like you can have hyper local television, you can have immediacy on Twitter, but there's nothing that blends the two where you can just go, let's turn it on. We know that 960 is going to be talking about this trade, or we know 770 is going to be talking about this big Calgary story, or like, and for television, they'll talk about it, but you got to wait till 6:00. Or you got to go tune into one of the national networks, and maybe they'll talk about it if it's in Calgary. Whereas that if you go to a Calgary radio station, whether you're listening to an FM drive show, the jock's going to talk about it at some point, or if you're listening to AM radio, they're going to have it. There's still nothing like that.
When the Lucic trade happened, I went right to you guys first thing because I knew. Yeah.
that's what we want. Like that is
Yep.
so much of as to what our brand is that, we like breaking news. Sure, it's fun to be the first guy on Twitter to have something or to be the first outlet. But we don't really care about that. Instead, what we want is, okay, Elliot Friedman just broke that Sam Bennett's going to Florida. I got to get to 960 to see what Boomer or what Derek or what Lou or what Steinberg are saying about it. That's what we want to be. We want to be the place where you just know that we're going to be talking about what you care about as a Calgary hockey fan. And we're going to be doing that, 9 out of 10 times when you turn on the radio, you're probably going to be hearing what you want to talk about. That's what we pride ourselves on. And I remember, Josh, this would have been, I want to say like at least 7 or 8 years ago, if not more. I'm not even sure if Richard remembers it or not, but I was out and we were at what I believe is now Original Joe's in Marda Loop.
Right.
I don't remember what it was called when we were there. It might've been OJ's then too, but
I
we
think
were
it was.
there and Richard was there with his wife and I had we all had kind of mutual different contacts in media and Gemma was working at the same radio station I was. We were both doing stuff at 660 News. Anyway, we were out. I remember getting into not quite an argument, but a conversation with Rich about satellite radio. And I thought that satellite radio was going to really, like, I was like, watch out. Like, I think that's going to be the thing that might take down terrestrial radio. And Rich was like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, it'll be a medium, it'll be fine, but it'll never take out terrestrial radio. And I still think about that conversation to this day, because it was A, I was wrong, and B, I was happy to be wrong, and C, satellite radio is a huge industry, but it still hasn't. You can't. There's no Calgary satellite radio show. There's like, you're never going to be able to go somewhere and get your local traffic, your local sports, your local news, and your local personalities that are connected to the city. You're never going to get that on Sirius, right? So it's amazing what radio has persevered through, and we play these sometimes ridiculous spots on our radio station. They're a nationwide Rogers branded spot, and the latest one was it's as if you were traveling through time and tuning in, and basically the gist of the spot is, in the early 1900s, they say, oh, watch out, this television medium is going to take down radio, and then satellite radio, and then they tune to like 1,000 years from now, and they're like, telepathic advertising is going to take down radio. And it's like, the whole idea is, it doesn't matter what happens, radio
Podcasts are going to take it down.
Podcasts or social media or whatever, but nothing's taken it down yet. And I honestly don't believe that anything will, at least while I'm still kicking on this.
But by the way, Pat, that's the only time I've ever been right, ever.
Well, you were, and now you have proof of it.
Yeah, but you're right. There's always been something challenging. When radio started having old-time radio shows, and as soon as television came in, what did radio do? Okay, now we're going to start playing music. Then people started getting 8-tracks, cassettes, then CDs, where they could pick what songs they wanted to play. So radio started playing the hits of what you should be buying. And this is a really good Katy Perry album or Madonna album or whoever, you should buy this type of thing for people, and it's adapted as well, where I think maybe one of the best things that ever happened to radio was satellite radio coming in, because it made radio go, you know what, we need to stay focused on what Calgary is, because that's what these people aren't getting from this medium. And it really centered people back to being more community based. You drive around Okotoks, you drive around High River, you drive around Strathmore, Airdrie. There are radio stations in those markets, and you go into, John's falafel shop in one of these markets, they're listening to that radio station. Because people they want to know more about their community, and they want to stay community based. And, because we can always get our information on, on the national scene from other avenues, but it's that local stuff that you've got to be able to get it from a local angle. So anyway, Josh, you had a follow up. Go ahead.
No, just to kind of finish up this kind of whole social media thing, and Pat could probably relate to this since we're kind of in that same age group, but it's this evolution with social media. Like, I remember growing up and waking up early, making sure that paper was on the front and going to check all the sports stuff all the way. Is like watching, looking at like the Flames box score if I didn't see the game, or like seeing, like, because that time, Pat, obviously we didn't get all the games, right? So there'd be like some NBA games we didn't get, like there wouldn't be a Bulls game. Like, how much did Jordan get? Because I didn't get to see it. Or you didn't see an Avalanche game, or I was a big Mighty Ducks fan at that point. Like, how many goals did Paul Correa get? And then you go and watch Sports Desk at that time to see the highlights of everything like that. And then you kind of bring it to now. And now you have a lot of these younger generation going up, and the way they're kind of judging players is they're not even looking at the box scores as much. They're watching the YouTube highlights and the TikToks. So in a weird way, like their whole idea of who the best player sometimes is a little whack. Like in the NBA, if some guy has a big dunker, it makes like Trae Young, for example, knocks in a bunch of threes, they're like, oh, that's the best player. Or if they'll see like an NHL player do like a fancy deke or something, though, that guy has to be really good because I had to see a bunch of highlights on him. It's so weird how that has changed of the evaluation of players from a different viewer.
Well, and I mean, you think about even when I started at the radio station, there were like multiple games a year over an 82 game season where a Flames fan just couldn't find it. It wasn't on national TV. It wasn't on local TV. The only place it was like, it was always, for whatever reason, in St. Louis. It was always a place that you just couldn't get the Flames and Blues. You could not find it in Calgary. And that obviously doesn't exist anymore. Every single game is on TV. And that's a huge change over the last 20 years. But I mean, think about that. Like in the 2000s, there were stretches where you just couldn't. The only place that you could have gotten a game was on radio. And you're right, like the way people consume, the way sports fans are interested in sports and the way they watch it, I think it's forced again the entire sporting industry to reevaluate the way they go about things. And you have to get new fans and to maybe get a 16-year-old who will soon be in the next decade in a huge advertising power age, and purchasing power will be where you want it as a sports team or a sports network. To get them to like your sport or to get them to be engaged in your team, you got to do things differently. You have to, like, he may not be the best player on the team, but look at this guy. He's so skilled. Like, let's just shoot out a 3-minute video on this. And it really has changed the way that you have to market your team. It used to be, well, hey, we're playing well, just watch our game. Or we're the only game in town. Game's at 6. You'll be watching. You can't do that anymore. You can't, because there's way too much competition. And I'm talking about, like, maybe there's 2 or 3 teams, the Yankees, the Packers, the Lakers. There might be 2 or 3 franchises that can just rely on, we're good, we're this team, we've got this history, games at 7, be there. Most teams can't do that. Most organizations, most networks can't do that. You've got to sell to people why they should sit down and spend 2.5 hours with you. And that has been a huge change as well. And there are some teams that do it so it's and some teams that just don't do it well at all. And it's reflected in, I think, in revenue, in fans and seats and butts and seats. It's a changing world out there. It is. You've got to be willing to do things differently. And there's always been a kind of reticence to do that in sports, but you have to be willing and embrace doing things differently than you did even 5 years ago in this industry now.
Yeah.
Well, you get to hear like different broadcasters now too, with the extent you have with your NHL Center Ice or NBA League Pass. Like before, I remember TSN on Sports Desk would the guy from Buffalo that would do the crazy calls for Hasek, right? And it was like, oh, I wish I could listen to a Buffalo game, but there was no way to listen to a Buffalo game. You just had to wait for them to show the highlights. And now, like, you get this extended library of having Center Ice or League Pass or whatever, and you can hear the biases and be like, okay, this broadcast is absolute trash. They are way too into their team. I can't listen to this broadcast anymore. I can switch it. So it's been interesting to have that way of things, whereas before you like, sometimes you'd have to wait for that Hockey Night in Canada game or the NBA and NBC game or the Monday Night Football game sometimes just to see your team. Or if you're out here, like you said with St. Louis, or like, I grew up watching the Ducks. It's like, well, the only way to see Paul Kariya tonight or Timo Solani is I'm probably going to have to go to this game to see certain players play, right? I remember like, oh, the Devils are never on TV. I want to go see Marty Brodeur. You had to go to the game or you had to listen to Peter call it on the air.
Yep.
A couple quick questions for you, Pat.
Yeah.
I see behind you a couple of footballs. I see a baseball. I see a Flames hat. Okay, so when you're a broadcaster in this league, you don't really have the opportunity to be a fan anymore, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. You don't wear it when you're sitting up in the broadcast booth. You don't have a Flames jersey on, and when they score, you're not standing there in the press box cheering on a Flames goal. right? You become more of an analyzer and an analyst when it comes to the games and breaking down
Yep.
the games to explain the games. When it comes down for you to be able to enjoy watching a game and not analyzing, what's your favorite?
Well, I mean, first of all, I actually like I was not big into hockey for about a few years there when I first started at the radio station. I wasn't. I don't know why, because it used to be the only thing I cared about. And then I got really into the NFL and I don't know what it was. And there was about 3 or 4 years there where early at the radio station, I was just not big into hockey.
Well, I
Because,
think you started there was 2004, right?
yep,
And then there was the strike, so it was gone for a year. And I know of a lot of people that are my age that lost their love of hockey because it was like it's just a bunch of money hungry millionaires
I
type
did.
of thing, right? So that may be where you got caught up in. But anyway, sorry.
well, and then also what happened right around is that they launched the all news station. And here, if you're a student listening right now, don't do what I did. But we launched the all news station, and my boss was like, "I'd really like you to help them out for however long he wanted me to do it for." And I thought I was going to be helping them out with sports. I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll be the sports guy at 660 News." This punk 22, 23-year-old kid just thinking he'd already made it and already should be able to call his shots, and instead they had me doing news and
The
traffic and
Yep.
all that type of stuff, and
I remember
I
that.
hated it. And I think that also played it. I was so mad at the world. I mean, no, I'm a sports guy. Don't do that. Don't ever do that if you're young entering the end. It does not help you in any way,
No.
shape, or form. And actually, I would say this to any person who is only interested in sports: if you have to do news, which you probably will, most people do at some point, you got to do some sort of news. Embrace it, because it'll make you better. You'll learn more about the world. You'll learn more about being a broadcaster. It'll make you a better broadcaster
Yep.
if you do news first. It just
And
100% will.
And here's
'Cause they
the thing, Pat,
intersect.
as well.
They do
Now,
intersect.
what people don't realize is that if you're a broadcaster, whether you're interviewing Johnny Gaudreau about potentially getting traded, or whether you're talking to a councilman about putting fluoride in the water, you need to do your research, right? You need to come up with questions. You need to be able to conduct the interview both on a technical level, being able to get good audio, okay, and then you still have to do the editing, the writing, and everything else. The skills are, like you said, they're connected, they're interweaved, and for me, this is the big thing. If you can do something really well that you don't like, man, how good are you going to be when you get finally do something that you do like, right?
Exactly. And you learn about different ways to get to do something well, and it applies when you're doing it in sports too. You just become better at being a broadcaster. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I got away from watching hockey, but now I just love, Flames games are what they are. Do
Yeah.
I cheer for the Flames? Look, I won't lie. It's better for us. It's just more fun to do your job when
For
they're
sure.
not garbage. When they're playing well, it's just more fun to do your job, and it's better for the station. It's better for everyone when they're a decent team. So we like that. Don't get me wrong. But I don't cheer for them. I don't really like, win or loss doesn't really affect me. And I don't know if I'm if that's 100% standard. I think there are some people who are more into wins and losses than others, and that's fine. There's no right way about going about it. But I find, for me, I can do my job better and be critical better, but also give praise better and be and be fair better by not really caring about
Right.
the results. But I still love watching a game between the Sharks and the Kings
Okay.
at 8:30, or a playoff. Like, there's just nothing better than, especially just sitting down and watching a playoff game or watching an important regular season game.
And not have to work it.
Exactly. Not having to work it, and just being able to live and die with, holy, like, this game is unbelievable. It's back and forth, and you're just watching the game, and you have more of an appreciation for it because you're like, well, I know that guy, and I know how that guy plays. And the other sport that I just love is Formula One. I just am an absolute F1 junkie, and have been for the better part of about 12 or 13 years.
Nice.
So there's the good news about that is you can just be a fan. Like, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of F1 talk on our radio station, so I don't have to. Like, you can just watch that and be a fan and enjoy it and cheer for your favorite driver and just be like any other F1 fan in the world. So that would be the one sport
Nice.
that I really like and just can get into without having any of my job come into the conversation, which I think is a big reason why I've really gotten into it the way that I have.
Right, because at least he can be a fan again rather than
Exactly.
just
Lewis Hamilton's a beast.
yeah.
Well,
So
he
speaking of
makes it hard to watch sometimes because he's so good. He always wins.
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier when the Flames are playing like trash. I want to wind the clock back about 17 years. We're, December of 2003, and the Flames are in the toilet, and we make a trade, and Kiprusoff comes over, and then they go on this magical run. The generation that's younger now that don't remember exactly that, how bad they really were. I remember I was at CJ92 at the time, and I remember that I had heard some stat somewhere that said every time the Flames have a home playoff game, that's an extra $1 million for the owners. And I remember us going through that run, and you just starting at the radio station at the time as well. It was like there was a real threat we were going to lose the team. And Peter brought this up when we talked to him, that a lot of people don't realize that this team was not that good. I don't want to say they didn't deserve to be there, but boy, were they the underdogs, and they were the Cinderella team. And it's kind of funny that this magical run that happened has become this rallying point for a lot of Flames fans, where it's just, they just can't let it go. It's like, oh, but you remember 2004? And I'm starting to wonder whether we're becoming like the old Leaf fans that didn't win a cup forever, or the people in Vancouver where it's like, yeah, you remember when we went to the Stanley Cup Finals, we should have beaten Boston. And it's like, I don't want to call it embarrassing, but it is. It's like, we need to move on. What your take on all this?
Well, it's funny because I've really gotten into the history of the Calgary Flames, especially during this pandemic, and so 2004 was unbelievable. And for me, being a Calgarian, having never truly experienced, it's like a pretty close to adult or somebody who is into hockey, what a playoff city feels like. Like the last time they were in was 96, and I would have been like 12 years old when they were in, or 11 years old. I remember they got eliminated by Chicago, and I was playing a soccer game. I was playing for McKnight Soccer when they got eliminated. I didn't care. It wasn't really a big deal. It was just like, Flames aren't very good. And then they make it back in 04, and then obviously what happens. But like, think about how good the Flames were from the minute they stepped foot in Calgary. They went, so they were in Atlanta, as we all know, and they made the playoffs for the last 5 years in Atlanta. And then they came to Calgary. They'd never won a playoff round before. And year one, they go all the way to the Final Four. And so here they are. Think about this, a brand new NHL team in your city, and they go to the Final Four in year one. We know, like, it was basically what happened.
Sounds like Vegas.
Exactly. We had that here in Calgary. The only difference was they were a relocated team as opposed to an expansion team. But the same way to ingratiate yourself to a new city. And then from that point forward, they made the playoffs all the way until 1992, when they missed the playoffs for the first time in Calgary. So your first decade plus, 2 runs to the Stanley Cup final, all these epic Battle of Alberta's playoff series with the Oilers. You had the run to the Final Four in 1981 as well. You had like Kent Nielsen and Lanny McDonald, and then Joe Nieuwendyk and Gary Suter and Al McInnes. And this team, like, it still blows my mind that in the 1980s, I think from 1983 to 1990, the Stanley Cup went through Alberta. It was either games being played in Edmonton or games being played in Calgary, because the Flames went twice, and every year the Flames went there, the Oilers were either winning or in the Stanley Cup final up until their last cup in 1990. So, and then to see how things changed and how the Canadian dollar and big business turned the Flames from being one of the 2 or 3 elite franchises in the NHL to being an also-ran. They couldn't pay McInnes. They couldn't pay Nieuwendyk. They couldn't pay Suter. Then they couldn't pay Fleury. And all these guys left and went elsewhere, and they tried to do things differently. And then so for 2004 to happen was just incredible with that lunch pail group of players. And Jerome Iginla was just starting to become the superstar player that he turned into be. But I mean, guys, so from 1989 to where we are now in 2021, and who knows if they'll even make the playoffs this year, they've won 4 playoff rounds in quick math, 32 years? 4 playoff rounds in 32 years. And those happened in 2 years. They won 3 in 04 and they won 1 in 15. They haven't won a playoff round other than those 2 years. Like, the existence of a Flames fan is just mediocrity and disappointment. It's just, and you're right. I think anybody who's still holding on to 2004, it's time to let that go. That was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and I think a lot of Flames fans are frustrated because they want their team to, they see the ownership, they see the money being spent. Well, it's time to build a real team that can win.
And I think the big thing that a lot of people are holding on to as well is the puck was in, but the puck was in. Yeah. And there was still 5 minutes left in the game, you know, and this is not the first team and won't be the only team. You look at the New Orleans Saints just a couple of years ago, getting, if you want to call it, robbed by the
your Seahawks, Richard. Just want to remind you of that.
You know, yeah. Thanks very much for that. You know, I mean, your team wins, your team loses, and I think maybe if COVID's done anything, it's hammered home that this is just a game. It's entertainment. Right? This isn't, there are people who make money at this. And if you're gambling on it, I guess you are as well, but this is supposed to be enjoyable, win or lose. And I think sometimes, you know, some people, just like I said, it's time to let it go a bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think that the fact that we didn't have sports for however long, and then they played for 2 months in August and September, and then we're gone until January again. I think it really has made people, most people, not everyone, but I think a lot of people have just like, you know what? Yeah, this year has not been fun to be a Flames fan. They have not been very good. It's been frustrating. All of that is true. But at least there was hockey. At least you had something to dive into and some sort of a distraction. I think it's been huge for a lot of people, even mentally, to have that. And I think it's really driven home what you said. It is still just a sport and a bunch of guys playing hockey for our entertainment. I think that's really been driven home.
Yeah, it's escape, right? It's escape from real life, from all the BS that we are dealing with. So go ahead, Josh.
Well, yeah, you mentioned it's a sport, but there is a sense of reality coming in, and there is a sense of an emotion side to it. And I think one of those sides was a few years ago with Jerome McGinley getting traded, where I actually saw grown men. One guy didn't show up to school because he was so devastated. Other guys were crying. I was just still reeling because I think at that time, being a Laker fan, Kobe tore his ACL, and I was upset about that still. And then the Iginla thing was like, oh, geez. But that was such, and Peter kind of talked about it, that was such a topsy-turvy day of, oh, he's in Pittsburgh, and what this weird left turn. Kind of talk about that whole day as being a reporter for the Flames.
It's a day that, like, it's one of those days, there's like certain days, good or bad, that like you always just kind of remember and remember a lot of what you did that day. So they were playing the Avalanche that night, and I remember we found out that Jerome was going to be scratched, and you're like, whoa. So I remember walking down to the Flames locker room area, trying to see if there was anything going on, and there standing was Peter Maher. So Peter Maher and I we talked for a little bit, trying to figure out, okay, so is this happening? Does this mean Jerome's getting traded, or are they just doing this for precautionary reasons so that if they do trade him, he's not hurt? And so then the game itself was kind of like, it didn't really matter. Like, you were watching the game. They played really well. They beat the Avalanche. It was one of their better games of the year. But you're just kind of like, it doesn't really matter. Like, the only story is Jerome. And I remember sometime in the second period where I was sitting in the press box, you're on the same side as where management sits. And I remember the GM and the AGM at the time, Jay Feaster and John Weisbrod, got up and they started walking very heatedly and feverishly across the catwalk. And you're like, okay, well, something's definitely up. Like, he must have gotten traded. And then you had everything, the TSN and Aaron Ward, everybody was so sure it was going to be Boston, and it was going to be Bartkowski and Koklachev, and a first round pick was what the Flames were getting. And we were all just convinced, but there was nothing official. And so I remember near the end of the third period, they sent out a media release that said, hey, Jay Feaster will be addressing the media after the game for a big announcement. And this was still not official. The Flames had not sent anything out. Nobody had been able to confirm what the trade was or where he was going. So we get downstairs and we start doing the post-game show. It was Mike Rogers, Peter Maher, and me. And we're doing the post-game show, and we're all like, okay, Flames won, whatever the score was. But what about this trade? Where's he going? Is he going to Boston? Is he going somewhere else? And so we have a live hookup to the media lounge. And at the time, I didn't have the ability to just turn on or off. It wasn't your typical radio board where you could turn it on and turn it off and then have it up in the right level. It was an old school mixer where you had to bring it up and bring it down, and there was no on or off. So you had to do that with everybody's mic and with any other feed you were going to use. And so I remember finally I could hear I had it on cue. And I remember, okay, Jay Feaster's walking in. We're moving over. Okay, let's go to Jay Feaster right now in the Ed Whalen Media Lounge. We're going to find out more about the Jarome McGinley trade. Turn it up. Forget to turn me down. And in the middle of Jay Feaster going through his preamble, like, we want to thank Jarome McGinley, and this is one of the hardest trades. This man has meant everything to the city of Calgary, but still hasn't announced the trade. And the Flames sent out the release in the middle of it. And so I've got my headset on and my mic is still live, and we're all expecting Boston. Peter Hanlon sends out the email, Jarome McGinley's been traded to Pittsburgh, and I'm in the middle. So I get my email, I open it up, and headset right on mic, completely on the air. I go, Pittsburgh? And before Jay had announced that he's going to Pittsburgh, so now people are listening, and Jay Feaster is going with all this preamble. Then you hear this donkey say Pittsburgh, and our text line blew up. Like, Pat, did you say he's going to Pittsburgh? What the hell is going on? And then about a minute later, he said, we have traded Jarome McGinley to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And everybody was like, we all thought he was going to Boston. Everybody thought it was going to be Boston. And that's kind of my one of my stories that I will always have, is that I accidentally spoiled it for Flames fans who were listening. And we would have had a massive audience at that time. Massive. Everybody who listens to the station would have been tuned in right then, all at the same time. And
I was listening that day.
Were you?
I remember that very distinctly.
And then immediately I'm like, oh, now I got to turn my mic down. It's like, well, it's too late now, but I've already spoiled it. But it actually was pretty funny. And if you were listening, you're like, whoa, Steinberg had it before, even though I didn't have it. I just got the email. Yeah. That was
exactly what I thought. I go, holy cow, is he ever connected? He's got it before Feaster.
Yeah, I had it. Well, and the funny part about that is you talk to Sean Kelso or Peter Hanlon, the two PR guys at the Flames. They were laughing at us all day because they knew at like 4:00, they knew the deal was done. He was going to Pittsburgh. They just had to do a couple of things. Jarome had to waive his no move, and they had to figure out a couple of immigration things. And the plan all along was to announce it after the game. But they knew the entire time, while TSN and Sportsnet were falling over themselves trying to get what the return was from Boston, they were just laughing at everybody because they're like, no, he's going to Pittsburgh, guys. He's not going to Boston. You guys are so off. But they didn't tell anybody. So we ended up, Craig Conroy still tells the story because he was just starting as in management. And he tells the story. He's like, I wanted to tell you guys that it was going to be Pittsburgh, but I didn't know I was still new. I feel bad to this day. I wanted to text somebody that you guys were way off. I wouldn't have told you where he was going. I just would have told you it wasn't Boston, but I couldn't do it. I didn't want to get in trouble. So yeah, it was. The call-in show went hours that night. I'll remember so much of that day for the rest of my life.
Speaking of the call-in show, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm going to ask you a tough question. Okay, you don't do the call-in show for as long as you do without having like really boneheaded questions. No names, okay, but like, what are like the top 3 or top few of the dumbest questions you've had? Generally, probably from drunk people, but still.
I had, like within my first year, it was either year 1 or year 2, but I want to say it was year 1. And I started doing that show the year that the Flames missed the playoffs for the first time. So they had made it for 5 straight years from 2004 until the 2009-10 season, and they missed in 2009-10. And so sometime they had a 9-game losing skid, and they had an awful second half that year. And sometime in that stretch, I remember somebody called in and was like, Pat, and not ironically, not as a joke, but Pat, I haven't noticed that Harvey the Hound has been into it as much. And I wonder if, Harvey not giving it his all has really contributed to the lack of fan support. And thus, I wonder if Harvey the Hound is something to do with why the Flames are losing. And I thought he was joking. He said, no, I'm serious. Like, I don't feel like it's the same atmosphere in the dome. And I think Harvey needs to cheer harder. and that could help the team. And I just like, what do you say? Like you're just like, this is your first year doing it. You're the first year on the beat full time, and you get that. So that's one.
You bring up your experience as a cannoneer.
I say, like, look at when we cheered hard, the Cannons won. Let me tell you that we had an impact.
By the way, my cousin, who is Harvey the Hound, I won't say the name because I don't want to spoil it for people out there. But yes, I do know who Harvey is. My cousin.
He does Scotty does a wonderful job.
He does do a wonderful job. I don't know if he was at that point. I think he was.
Or no, that would have been Chris. Would have been Harvey the Hound at that time. Both do unbelievable.
Okay, so there's another good story from overtime.
Well, this would have been more recently, within the last couple of years. I just remember this guy calling in, and he was going through. He's like, "Look, Flames are going to make the playoffs, and they're going to go, and they're going to win their first round series." And and he was going through, I think they're going to play Pittsburgh in the first round. And I go, nope, can't do that. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, they're in different conferences. They can't play each other in the first round. He goes, and then it drops a 4-letter bomb and hangs up. He's like, oh shit. And then hangs up from there. And you're like, oh, guess I should have just let him keep on rolling. Because every time there's a swear, you hope that your board op is on the ball and hits the delay button, or you hope that it's set, or and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But that time it wasn't, and everybody heard it, and it got on the air. So then then your boss is texting you better apologize. I had no control of it because I'm sorry for the language. I'm sorry that got on the air. So on and so forth. So those are two that, at one time I had a guy just call in to tell me to F off, live on the air. But the Harvey the Hound one will.
They still play that clip. Boomer still plays that clip of that one guy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and for good reason. It was hilarious, and I just was like, it was at the end of the night. It was at Shanks. It was like 1:30 in the morning. I was like, oh, well, that's a good time to say goodnight. Have a great night, everybody. It's so exasperated that you just got told to F off live on the air. You're like, have a great night, everybody. I'm going to go home now. I've had enough.
I guess I'm done. Too funny.
I guess one of my questions, what's some of your best stories of relating with, and what is your overall relationship with players?
I mean, I try to keep distance in that, they got a job to do. I've got a job to do. So I try not to be too buddy, but I mean, especially in non-COVID times, you're in the locker room all the time. You get to know them. There are certain guys that they see you as much as they see their family, right? Because you're so, you get to know guys pretty well, and it's tough. It's actually one of the things that I never prepared myself for, because, I've developed pretty professional. I always try to go out of my way to not ever get to the point where you'd go for dinner with or anything like that. That's just something that I think that you need to keep an arm's length on. But I've gotten to know Michael Backlund really well. I've gotten to know Mark Giordano really well. More recently, I've gotten to know Rasmus Anderson and Dylan Dubé really well. And so one of the things that you don't necessarily prepare yourself for is okay, now these are guys that you've got a rapport with, and now you got to go crush them on the air. And now you have to go, and it gets back to them. I don't think any of the guys listen very often, but their families do, and their friends do. And so it gets back to them. It's well, you just absolutely ran Rasmus Anderson over with a bus about how bad he was. And so one of the things that you don't, I think, understand is how uncomfortable that can be. But you also understand that, these guys understand it goes with the territory. They make millions of dollars, and so the one thing that I have always prided myself on is if I'm going to write an article or if I'm going to do a segment about how bad a player is playing, I better have the balls to be in the locker room the next day to, if they wanted to come up and say, I didn't like what you said, that was off base, I really was offended by that. You know how many times I've had a player come up to me and say they didn't like what I've said? 0 times. But I know for a fact that they notice who is there and makes themselves available, and who doesn't. And because I've talked with guys about, they're like, look, we respect the guys that are in the locker room who are going to criticize, which is their job, and it's part of our job to take the criticism, but we respect it when you're there, so that if we had a problem with it, we can come talk to you. And they 99.9% of the time, unless you're taking runs at their family or their personal life or something,
Right.
if you're going to take a shot at them as a hockey player, they're like, well, yeah, you know how much I get paid to play hockey? I can deal with it. You know what?
Yeah.
You don't play. You're not an NHLer. You don't make $5 million a year. So you know what? We'll take it. We might not like it, but we'll actually probably be able to sleep at night, because like, we make more money than you. We play in the NHL. It's okay. We're doing
Part of the game.
right?
It's part of the game, right?
Exactly. It's part of what goes into the business.
And you're a professional as well. And I think that's one lesson you can definitely give to the young broadcasters who might be listening. It's, make sure you're there to live up to it, because there's nothing worse than writing something and then going to hide. Right.
100%. Well, 100%. And so the relationship is pretty cordial. Like if you see them out, you say hi. Maybe you'll talk to them for 10 minutes, 5 minutes. But I would say that, the relationship is very much professional, and it's gotten more and more that way too. With the advent of social media, I really think professional athletes have become, talk to Peter Marr about when he was traveling with the team in the 80s and the 90s to now what our guys with Derek and Pete, completely different. He was part of the team, but now it's a little different now. It really is. And for good reason, because I think they have to insulate themselves and be careful about, how much they're being vulnerable out there, because when you're vulnerable, it can hurt your brand, it can hurt your earnings, it can paint you in a bad light. So I think the advent of social media has made it so that they're a little bit more guarded around media, and for good reason. I totally respect why.
Yep. Awesome.
Wrapping up here, just last question for you, Pat, and again, thanks so much for your time today. Number one, your main advice for any of the young broadcasters, and what's the future for Pat Steinberg?
What's the future for me? I'll answer that, because I honestly I don't really, at this point, I don't really think of it like, and it's not like I don't have any ambition or anything like that. It's more just like right now, A, in this industry, B, at this time in the industry when there's a worldwide pandemic, I'm just happy to have a job. I honestly, it's like we just lost people again, and it's like every couple of months, Rogers or Bell or somebody's cut. You're just like, I'm just happy to be employed, and I'm just happy to be doing what I love. And I know that it'll probably end at some point. But for now, I'm just, so would I take a job elsewhere? Maybe if there was a chance to go to a bigger market or go south of the border, yeah, I'd look into it. But I'm also pretty damn happy doing what I do. My work-life balance ain't great, but it pays off in the summertime. And I'm really proud of the work that I've done, building to where I am in Calgary, and being a Calgary guy. Like, this is my city. Yep. I was born and raised here, and now I'm, at a radio station that was so important to me growing up. And now here I am as a big part of that radio station. So I'm happy doing what I'm doing in perpetuity. I really would be, if that's what it would be for the next 15, 5, 30, whatever, I would do it for the rest of my professional life. So that would be the best way I would answer the future question, because I look and I've had opportunities, and I still look, and I still am always interested in the next challenge. But if this is it, I'm fine with that. I really am. My biggest, and this is the thing that I would say to any young broadcaster, especially in sports, who wants to get into sports, is just be ready to say yes all the time, and just be ready to do anything that is thrown at you, and to do it however long it takes, so that the job gets done right. And the one thing that I always tell anybody, when I get the opportunity to do a project with a first or a second year SAIT student, I realize how daunting it must look to get into the industry right now, more daunting than when I got into it. And I realize that, but my advice and my kind of the philosophy that I would impart, I still think carries over now. If you are willing to do the work, and if you are willing to put the effort in, and are willing to be patient, even if you have to force yourself and it's a begrudging patience, you will get noticed and you will get somewhere. I still 100% believe that, because I don't think personally I'm the most talented broadcaster. Like, I think there are guys that I have worked with, that I have seen elsewhere, that just from a natural standpoint have better voices, say less, they're smoother, they're more polished. But the one thing that I know is that you put my work ethic up against anybody, and I will at the very least work as hard as anybody, if not outwork anybody in this industry. And that is why it's 100% why I am where I am, because I have busted my ass and I know that I have put the work in, put the prep in. And I think anybody, there are a lot of people, and this is not a criticism, but there are a lot of people who I just don't know if they're prepared for that coming into the industry, news or sports. So it is a grind, and you got to be willing to be okay with the grind. But if you are, you know what? If you're up for a job and there are two people, and you've got this guy who's maybe this talented and this guy who's this talented, but this guy works his ass off and this guy just kind of gets behind the talent, this guy or this person is going to be the person that the program director, the sports director, the hiring person is going to, that's the person we need, because we know that they can do other things. We know that if there is a shift that needs to be covered, they'll cover it, even if it means working an 18-hour day. So my advice is always just be ready, willing to work, and put every single ounce of work that you need to put into it, and outwork the person beside you. Because I really do believe, especially in this day and age, that is so huge.
It took 90 minutes for me to say this, but it really comes down to those 6 words that's been my mantra ever since I started teaching. How bad do you want it?
Yep.
Plain and simple. You know, and you with that comes sacrifice, and you have had sacrifices of, like you said, your work-life balance isn't as good as you'd like it to be, but it balances off in the summer. There's things you've had to give up to be able to get to the point you're at, but it comes down to, again, how bad do you want it, what you're willing to give up to get what you really want, because there's a lot of people out there that just kind of want it, but they don't know what they have to do to get it.
Yep.
Right. So,
and that's, you know what? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to just, you know what, have a better work-life balance. And,
nope.
You know, I haven't been very good over the years of keeping relationships and all, you know what? And that's not a good thing necessarily. Like, I'm not saying that doing what I did is the way to live your life. I'm really not. But if you are willing to make those sacrifices, you 100%, I still believe this, as difficult and as there are fewer jobs now than there were 10 years ago, no doubt about it. But if you are willing to bust your ass, it will get noticed and you will get somewhere. Yeah. I 100% believe that, and if you're willing to do it. And if you're not, there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't.
And something tells me that if you had to do this all over again, you'd make the same choices.
100%. On that front, I really wouldn't change anything in terms of what I've put into it to get to this point. And there were times when I might not have said that, but I stuck with it. But seeing how it, you know, looking back, I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that I kept on the road and I didn't become, you know, any of the other things that I thought about doing. No, this is what I want to do. I'm going to stick with it for this much longer, or this little bit, and it has worked out. And so I do not regret a thing. I really don't.
Awesome. Pat, I can't thank you enough. Went on a little longer than we thought, but that's what happens with good conversations with good people. You forget the time, right? So, Pat, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. If people are looking to get more from Pat, obviously every single day on the Fan 960, it's the big show, and hockey games. You won't get enough Pat Steinberg. There's tons there, and there's tons
too much.
Awesome. Thanks again, Pat. Really appreciate your time, man.
It was awesome. Thank you, gents.
Thanks so much, Pat. Cheers. Enjoy the day, people.